Hello, everybody.
Oh, hello.
I am Gyro Sean, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we're not going to open up packs. Been doing a lot of that lately, but I'm going to get back to talking about the game a little bit. If you are a pretty new player, just sort of getting into the game, something that I always was considering and wondering about when I was getting into it was, okay, well, there's just so many options, which is a good thing for Pokemon, is that there's like a ton of different decks that you can build as opposed to, I think, other games out there. But one of the questions that I was wondering was like, okay, well, what do I start with, all right? Like, what deck should I build? I can go watch a ton of videos, which is always a good thing. There's a lot of great resources out there, but, these decks are not necessarily the cheapest thing in the world. So what should I build as my first or second competitive deck? So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. I have 3 decks in mind that I'm going to call sort of, it's not perfect. It's hard to say exactly where the meta is going to go in 3 months or more, but I think for now I am confident in saying that these are 3 future-proof-ish decks that you can figure out if you like this style or not, and then go out and build one. Let's get started with the first deck, and this deck is super popular right now. So I think these examples won't necessarily be a surprise if you've been following a little bit, but I'll give you reasons why I think they're future-proof as opposed to some other decks. The first deck I'm going to talk about is going to be Ability Zard, Tord Zard, basically the Reshizard build that is not reliant on Green's Exploration and Power Plant. Now, why do I prefer this build? Well, there's a few reasons. It's not so heavily reliant on basically one Pokemon. Like, this deck is like, it's all Reshizard focused. Volcanion, I guess, can attack sometimes. For the most part, it's all about powering up your Reshizard. So if you're sort of sat there against something that for whatever reason you can't hit through, like Latios GX's Tag Purge ability, or say you don't have the ability to get a Power Plant out for some reason, you're up against Keldeo, or I don't know, doesn't matter. It's not very flexible, so the Tord Zard Ability Zard variant is incredibly flexible as a deck. You have a big 3-prizer in Reshizard that can do massive damage. Great. You have Heat Train, which you can throw down and do massive damage with the GX attack, or really consistent damage with its normal attack for 130. And then you have Pokemon like Turtonator, who can do 300 damage if you discard 6 energy. You have Victini Prism Star, which can do as much damage as you have energy in the discard pile. And that's just a 2 energy attack, which is also nice. And now you've started to see some other cards come into the equation, like Baby Blacephalon is being brought back in. So that can do a massive amount of damage as well as a 1-prizer. So it's a nice balance between really big, powerful Pokemon and powerful but small 1-prize Pokemon. And it plays very quickly. And there's just so much support for pure fire archetypes out there right now that I think this build of Reshizard, or Firebox, whatever you want to call it, is going to be really viable in the future. I don't really see any immediate challenges. And you're going to get other cards in the future too, which might help this build. In the new set that's coming out, you have Volcarona GX, which I know will probably be a really interesting card to start thinking about including in some fire decks. And, there will be others. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but definitely a really good deck to build if you want decks that hit hard, play fast, a little bit, like at times, I think when you're piloting that deck, you could get halfway through the game and be like, it's not as safe as I thought I was. But I think that's just the nature of the deck, and it's really fun in that way. So the second deck that I would recommend that you look into if you are thinking about building a deck as one of your first or second competitive decks is gonna be Mewbox. Now, another obvious choice, right? Mewbox is super popular right now, but it's popular for all the right reasons. It's incredibly versatile. You can put all the cards in it that make sense today. You can take advantage of new GX cards that are coming out in this final Sun and Moon set. And then even after that's done, depending on where the meta heads in the future, it's an incredibly adaptable deck. Now, the watch out I have for Mewbox is going to be, we don't know what Sword and Shield is going to look like card-wise. I doubt very much they're going to keep printing GX cards in Sword and Shield because that's just not how Pokemon operates. They had EX cards in XY, they had GX cards in Sun and Moon, and then they have V, Pokemon V coming out in Sword and Shield. In my mind, it does not make sense for them to keep printing GX cards. So that's the only potential downside to Mewtwo, is that after Sword and Shield comes out in February, it stops seeing support the way that other decks might. But you know what? I think that's okay. You can take advantage of the Pokemon V cards that come out in the future and still have a Mewtwo and some other Pokemon as that flexibility that you might need. So between that, I think you're getting a lot of other really great cards coming out of the new set. There's a new tag team with, I don't know if it's like Igglybuff and Lopunny, Mega Lopunny or something like that. But that card basically is going to let you, for 3 energy, completely destroy other decks that have lots of bench GX Pokemon. Super powerful. I also think that the new Charizard and Braixen tag team that comes out for 180 damage, and I think you get to go search your deck for 3 cards. That's super powerful. And you don't even have to use that as the attacker, you can use Mewtwo. So it's like a lot of support still coming out for that deck. It relies on Welder, all the things that I think the best decks today are able to rely on, it can rely on that as well. So, and I also think that Mewbox, going into the future, could also become a deck that can lean into special energies more. I think today, the number 1 decks that you see out of Mewbox are Psychic Fire, but you have a tag team supporter now that lets you go get a Stadium, a Pokemon Tool card, and a Special Energy. That's a pretty awesome supporter card that would make Rainbow Energies or Unit Energies really, really powerful in Mewbox builds if you can just go get them when you need them. So you can use Welder for the extras, go get the Special Energy when you need it, call it a day. So that is why I think Mewbox is going to continue to be a really good archetype moving forward. Now, the last deck that I think is going to be really powerful moving forward, and I think it's because of a few reasons, some of which are obvious, and I think a couple of which are really not that obvious until you sort of see what I'm talking about. And that last deck is actually Blacephalon. Blacephalon trades really well today on prize count. You are, taking hopefully 2-3 prizes and only giving up 2. You don't have anything in your deck that gives up 3 prizes. I think the inclusion of Heatran in the deck is massive because Blacephalon doesn't need to use its GX attack to take prizes. And Heatran can come down and take those 3 prizes with his GX attack when you need it to. So another really awesome example of a card that is just strengthened this deck's archetype. You still have your Beast Rings, you still have Beast Energy, you have that Naganadel that lets you get all those energy from the discard back. I think obviously the only challenge that this deck has faced recently is Tapu Fini. It's a card that basically was printed with the idea that it's a pure counter to Blacephalon. But I think that right now Blacephalon is going a little bit under the radar. I see fewer and fewer Tapu Fini techs in the biggest decks, in the most meta decks in the format right now. You'll see Tapu Finis in anti-meta decks, sure. You're going to see it in Checkmate. You're going to see it in one prizers, whether that's maybe a Spiritomb or, I don't know, a bunch of other random anti-meta decks. But ultimately, you can bring an anti-meta deck and it's a lot of fun. But if this is your first or second deck, I wouldn't worry too much about the rogue decks out there. So knowing that Tapu Fini is not necessarily floating around out there anymore because people don't expect as much Blacephalon for some reason, Blacephalon is a really good deck to build. On top of that, there's a card or 2 that are coming out in the next set that I think makes Blacephalon even more powerful. You have a Pokemon Tool card called, I think it's Beast Knight or something, that I believe, I don't know if it lets you take an extra prize or it lets you do extra damage. I think it lets you do extra damage for each prize card that you have taken. So it means you basically have to lost zone less energy late game, which is great. That's amazing. On top of that, I think a tool card that people haven't really considered much with this deck is there's an amulet card coming out in the next set. What that card does is it lowers your Pokemon's HP by 100, but it also makes it to where that Pokemon gives up less prize if it is KO'd by an opponent's attack. Now there's ways around this, obviously. Damage counter kills do not impact this, but I think about Blacephalon, I think to myself, 180. 180 HP is not a lot, right? You got to assume that your opponent's going to knock that thing out next turn, no matter what. Most matchups, your opponent is going to have the KO on you once you bring it to the active and take all those prizes. So why not just throw an amulet on there and say, you're going to kill me anyways. I'll make it easy for you, but you're only taking one prize off this Blacephalon. Well, all of a sudden, it's not a 2 to 3 prize trade difference. It's a 1 to 3 prize trade difference on a Pokemon that only takes 2 energy to attack and can easily hit for 300 damage. So I think that's another card that you could start seeing make its way into Blacephalon decks to just really make that prize trade absolutely horrendous for anyone that you're up against. So that's why I think that Blacephalon is also a really great choice moving forward and is going to be very future-proof in many ways. Now, obviously, there was a few inclusions or exclusions, I should say, that didn't make this cut. I think that, personally, I don't love the way that Pikarom has gone. I played a lot of Pikarom. Don't get me wrong, Pikarom is a really consistent deck. But I think it's starting to see a lot of strain in the meta. Despite it getting still some really good finishes at Sheffield and other matches, the fact that you're basically running Pikarom like a hand disruption Pikarom, when I don't think that's what a lot of the cards that are there to support electric type decks, they're not really designed to be a hand disruption make deck. Now you can make a deck anything you want, don't get me wrong, but I think between that and that tag team card coming out, which basically hits you for 60 extra damage for each GX on your bench, Pikarom is okay, I'm going to bench 4 GXs. I'm going to have a Dene on the bench, probably. I'm going to have a Zeraora on the bench. I'm going to have a Raichu and a Lothern Raichu on the bench. And I might even potentially have another Pikarom or, I don't know, some other GX to the bench, a second Dedenne, right? An Ultra Necrozma. So if you have 3 Pokemon on your bench, that attack does 240 damage, which KOs a Pikarom. Because that's 3 times 60 is 180 plus the 60, 240. If you have 4, you're doing 300 damage, which KOs anything that you can put out there. So that card alone, I think, is going to make it really difficult for Pikarom in the future. I think that there's just, I don't know, I see Pikarom really struggling after this. And so I think a lot of those decks are actually going to be dismantled for a new deck archetype that is going to be coming out in the future, Reshiram and Zekrom, which is a fire-electric mix. Anyways, so that's why I really don't see Pikarom being a deck that you should focus on building right now if you want to be playing it in 3 to 6 months. So, well, those are just my thoughts. A bit of, some rambling here and there, but hopefully if you're looking to build your first competitive deck, this has hopefully been some helpful insight from somebody who's played against a lot of this recently and who's built several of these decks. I have an Abilities Art, I have a Mewbox myself that I've played. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments section. What deck are you really excited about that you want to build for the next 3 to 6 months? Yeah, and thank you so much for watching. I will catch you all. I will catch you all later. Definitely subscribe and like if you like this stuff. So, carpe awesome.